Good morning, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be here today, chatting to you, Angie Thomas. I feel like Angie doesn't really need any introduction at all. You all know who she is, but I'm going to introduce her anyway. Angie Thomas is the #1 New York Times best-selling, award-winning author of The Hate U Give, On the Come Up, and Find Your Voice. A former teen rapper who holds a BFA in creative writing, Angie was born, raised, and still lives in Jackson, Mississippi. Everyone, please make Angie welcome today. So, Angie, I'm talking to you on a very sweaty summer day in Melbourne. Where are you talking to us from this evening?
I'm in Mississippi. I'm in the past here in the States, in Mississippi. You all are on Sunday. It's still Saturday here.
Okay.
I'm in Mississippi where it's cold. So I'm very envious of your summer weather.
Oh, yeah, we're kind of at opposite ends of the spectrum here, really, aren't we? So this might be one of the strangest book releases you've ever had for Concrete Rose. It's probably really different from The Hate U Give and On the Come Up. What has it been like releasing Concrete Rose at this particular point in history?
It's definitely been different. It's been an adjustment. It's weird not being able to see my readers in person and connect with my readers in person. Zoom is okay, but there's nothing quite like someone coming up to you in a signing line and telling you how much they love your book or how much they look forward to reading it, and just having that moment with that reader. Then there's nothing like that. So it's not the same, but I am appreciative of, so many people have still been supportive of the book and everything, and have been coming to the Zoom events like you all today. So that's been lovely. I don't miss running through airports.
Oh, no.
I do not miss that part. I don't miss hopping from plane to plane. I'm doing an event with you all right now, and then I have events with like my UK publisher and my French publisher, and I don't have to hop on a plane and go from continent to continent, country to country. So that's a welcome change.
Bonus. Less jet lag. Yeah. I guess that is a bonus. So in Concrete Rose, we actually travel back in time to the late 90s, and we meet Maverick Carter as a 17-year-old. And we first met Maverick as an adult, as Starr Carter's father, in The Hate U Give. And we get to see the early days of Maverick's relationship with Lisa, and also meet many other familiar characters from The Hate U Give, such as King, Aisha, Carlos. When did you first know that you were going to write about Maverick Carter as a teenager?
I had no plans to do this originally. When I finished writing The Hate U Give, I really thought I was done with the Carter family. But apparently I wasn't, because when I would do events and I would get the Q&As from my readers, so many of them would ask about Maverick more than any other character, which is odd because, it's a book about Starr, and usually in young adult literature, people don't really care about the parents. Like sometimes the parents aren't even really on page, Yeah. But the kids would tell me they love Starr's dad. Then the moms would tell me they wanted to marry Starr's dad. and the dads would tell me that they learned from him. And they would always ask me, like, how did he become the man and the father that we see in The Hate U Give, the pillar of the community, when we know from Starr telling us that he used to sell drugs, that he used to be in a gang. He once went to prison. How did he become the person we see now? And I started to ask myself the same question. And it felt like the best way to answer their questions was to write a book. So I have to thank my readers for this one.
It's really interesting that it was readers that kind of pointed you in the direction of who your next protagonist was going to be. So at the point that the story starts, everything is about to change for Maverick. He's been on one track with his life as a teenager, and then in the first few chapters, something happens. He finds out he's going to be a dad unexpectedly, and that really kind of turns his life completely upside down, as you would imagine it would. How did you pick that this was the exact point in time that you're going to start the story? Because we already knew from The Hate U Give that Maverick had a really long and checkered history. So why was this the moment that you picked to start Concrete Rose?
This felt like the right moment because it's the moment where Maverick begins the process of becoming the man we will see in The Hate U Give. Becoming a father is what really helped change him into the person we later see. had I gone earlier, we would have seen a knuckleheaded 17-year-old who's making bad decisions. Not to say he's not still a knuckleheaded teenager, you know, in the book in Concrete Rose, but before that, he was a selfish kid who didn't have many hopes, dreams, or aspirations, who just wanted to get by. And the turning point, the biggest turning point in his life is when he finds out he's a father to 7. And that just felt like the right moment, especially since I was so often asked about how he became the dad we see. And so many people loved him as a father. I felt it was important to show he hasn't been always the best at it. He has to learn, he has to grow. So it was kind of like looking at a rose and seeing it starting to get its buds. I felt like that's the moment where Maverick starts to get his buds as a rose, is when he becomes a father.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, I think, in his life. You know, he starts off the novel and he's one of the little homies in the gang, and he kind of lives in the shadow of his father, and he's called Lil Don. So he's kind of in the shadow of his father before him. I feel like there are so many things in this book. I mean, Concrete Rose is such a wonderful book, and I feel like there's so much that's being said about manhood and fatherhood, grief and revenge, what it means to be courageous and strong, and what it means to be part of a family, and how to show love and how love comes out in people. I wonder if you wanted to explain, you know, Maverick's pretty confused about what it means to be a man, and it feels like he's getting a lot of mixed messages from the people around him about what actually a man is and how a man should behave. I wondered if you could explain a little bit more about the kind of mixed signals that Maverick's getting about what being a man means.
The mixed signals he gets are unfortunately the mixed signals a lot of young men get in society nowadays. They're sometimes told that men can't cry, men have to be tough all the time, men can't be sensitive. And in a lot of ways, that messaging is harmful to boys, and it's putting limitations on boys. And it's not allowing them to process their emotions in a healthy way. And so Maverick is getting it from different people, specifically from other men or young men in his life who, in a lot of ways, are still trying to figure it out themselves. So you have someone like King, who is still a kid in a lot of ways, trying to tell Maverick what a man is supposed to be. You have someone like Dre, who's still trying to figure it out for himself, but he's telling Maverick what he's learning along the way. But then you have others in the neighborhood who only associate strong masculinity with being hard and tough, and being a badass, you know? And I think it was important for me to have all of those perspectives come at him, but also to have a bit of a calm in the storm in the form of Mr. Wyatt, his next door neighbor, who is already a grown man who knows who he is. Therefore, he can give Maverick a better direction of what it truly means to be a man. So I really wanted to push back against some of the toxic masculinity that our boys have to deal with, and the images of manhood, challenge the quote unquote images of manhood, and say he's still a man if he cries. He's still a man if he's sensitive. There's nothing wrong with a boy crying. There's nothing wrong with a boy being emotional. And hopefully I can help some young men better understand that.
I think some of, the most heartbreaking parts of the book were that, you could see Maverick feeling strong emotions, especially when his son comes along, but is so many times like shutting them down, and it's no one else doing it. It's himself internally shutting down those feelings and trying to toughen up. And I think that came across really beautifully. I think this kind of relates very strongly to a question that's just come in from Cheska. And that's, I found Maverick to have a really compelling first-person male voice. And Cheska's asking, what was it like writing from a male character's point of view this time round, rather than a female character in your 2 previous novels?
It was terrifying at first because I've never been a 17-year-old boy, and I never will be a 17-year-old boy. And I wanted to get it as authentic or right as possible. And what I had to do was I had to read books by Black men specifically, read books about Black boys, and even talked to Black boys and Black men and authors who write about Black boys and Black men. And I had to put my own maybe assumptions aside, because at times early on when writing the book, there were some moments where I was like, should I let him cry? Should I let him have those moments? Will that make him appear weak? And that's because society has even played in my head with that. And I had to talk to men about it. And they were like, no, you have to let him have those moments. Give him that permission on page so that hopefully people will start giving us that permission in real life. And, you don't think about that a lot, but that's kind of powerful. And I think about it specifically in regards to Black boys and Black men. They, I think more than any other demographic of men and boys, are often made to look like they don't have emotions. They're dehumanized so often, and they're made to think that they can't cry because it's a form of weakness. And again, it's a part of the dehumanization of them, so that when we see them killed by police or this or that, it's easier to digest because they weren't a human being to a degree to us. And that's something I want to push back against. So it was so important for me, for Maverick to have those moments, and getting into his head. Once I took myself out of the way and took any preconceived notions I had out of the way, it was so much easier to write him.
It's really interesting, isn't it, that, when you're relying on the representations around you, and the representations themselves that get through have their limitations, you have to be so picky about whose voices you listen to as being authentic.
Yes.
And it sounds like you really took it down to the human level of not just relying on media and representations, but really going and chatting to young men themselves to come up with that character. You said, you did describe some of Maverick's actions as knuckleheaded, which is kind of funny. And it's true, I love that he's not holier than thou. He does actually make mistakes, but you really see him dig deep and find his internal strength in concrete rows. But I always got the sense that his individual choices and decisions were only part of the equation and was only part of what was holding him back in life. There's a really strong sense that in many ways it's hard for him to beat the system that he's been born into. And it made me think about what might have changed for Black teenagers over the years, given that, this is set 17 years ago. And then The Hate U Give is set, in current times, but it seems like some things haven't changed for Black teenagers. Did that just come out naturally in exploring Maverick as a character, or did you kind of have half a mind on kind of thinking in a broader social sense, or making some kind of social commentary, or thinking really broadly about it?
It was more focusing on him. The unfortunate thing is, if I focus on him as a character, all that other stuff will reveal itself. This will probably shock people, but I try not to set out to, send a message or anything too much, but it just comes out, it just comes across. And the thing about Maverick is that, so much of what he goes through is because of his decisions, but there are so many other factors in his life that are affected by systemic racism. We see his father and his father's incarceration. And it's easy to even say that's totally because his father made bad decisions. But you also wonder, what kind of position was he in as a young person that he fell into that lifestyle? What made him think that he had to be a leader of a gang or sell drugs in order to provide for his family? What is available in a community like that for someone to be able to survive? And then we look at Maverick. He's a strong-willed, hard-headed kid at times, but he has his heart in the right place too, and he wants to do right. But what opportunities are being given to him so that he can do right? What opportunities are being given to him so that he can succeed? I wanted to look at how the school system, in a way, fails a kid like him, because he's one of many, and it's so hard for the educators to be able to keep up with him that he gets left by the wayside. And this is a systemic issue. This is something that the system is doing. So again, I focused on him because it's his story, but all the other stuff started to show itself along the way. And hopefully it will give people a better perspective on the real Mavericks out there.
Great, fantastic. Thank you. I was wondering, given that you didn't know initially you were going to write about Maverick, but readers kind of pointed you, kind of gently nudged you in that direction. And there's a lot of Maverick in The Hate U Give. Was there anything you put in The Hate U Give that later came to be a real pain in the ass when it came to writing Concrete Rose? Like some kind of limitation where you're like, damn, I wish I didn't put that in The Hate U Give because now it's making life hard for me with Concrete Rose? Or was it all you just saw all these beautiful seeds that you'd planted unwittingly in The Hate U Give and they kind of just flourished for Concrete Rose? Was it a little bit of both? Or
you're the first person to ask me that, and that is a great question. There was one, and don't judge me, you all, but if you go back in The Hate U Give, and Starr, when describing her dad, she gives an age for him that does not line up with the age he is in Concrete Rose.
Oh.
And so my excuse now is that how many teenagers know exactly how old their parents are? Sometimes they're
just old.
I'm right. I'm in my 30s and I got to ask my mom, how old are you? Yeah. See, I got to ask her because I can't remember off the top of my head sometimes. So that's my excuse. I'm sticking to it. But at first it was like, oh God, somebody's going to call me out on that. So when it gets noticed on social media, I'll just have to admit the flub. But beyond that, I think the hard part was the fact of his father being gone away from when he was at such a young age. In The Hate U Give, Maverick says his dad went to prison when he was 8. And that really put a limit on me because originally I would have loved to have had his father around during this time, especially in his life.
Yeah.
I think it could have been powerful. I think it could have shown even more so how he becomes the dad we see because he had such an example right there. So that was like the big thing that really got in the way. But I think it worked out for the story because we meet his father. I'm going to try not to spoil it, but we do meet his father in Concrete Rose, and he does have a pretty important role in Maverick's life still. If nothing else, he's the example of what Maverick doesn't want to end up being. So it worked out in its own way, but I do wish that I wouldn't have said what age Maverick was when his dad went to prison.
I mean, I think for me, it really works having him on his own, like having fatherhood kind of sort of jump on him and to not have his own father, like really right there to help him. So in a way, kind of having him kind of a little bit adrift and lost kind of actually worked for his kind of character journey and character development. Yeah. So it's a shock to me. I think I'm about 10 years older than you. It's a shock to me now to know that the late 90s, if you write about the late 90s, it's a historical novel. It's historical fiction. Did it feel like that when you were writing it? Because there were little nuggets. There were little 90s nuggets in there that I was just like, I felt so sad when I saw Kobe Bryant mentioned. I just was like, but there was a lot of nice little 90s things in there. Did you approach it like writing a historical novel?
I didn't. I didn't feel like it to me. That's still a hard pill for me to swallow. I remember 99, 98. I mean, I remember watching the 1999 MTV Video Music Awards because it was a big deal because it was on 9/9/99. Like, I remember this stuff. And you mean to tell me that's historic now? Yeah. That was like, I still listen to music from that era. So I've tried not to even approach it as that, but I did recognize that there were some things in this novel that my young readers wouldn't know what the heck I was talking about, like a pager. Some of them don't know about CDs and cassette tapes and VHS tapes. That made me feel old realizing that.
I think does Maverick say at some point, a CD is going to be around forever anyway? And I was like, no!
I know he has no idea, poor baby. He has no idea. And it also made it a little harder on me writing some things because I'm so used to technology now that there are moments where I'm thinking it would be so easy if he could just text somebody. It would be so easy if he could send somebody a direct message on social media, but none of that stuff exists. However, I think what helped me to not get overwhelmed by the fact it was a historical piece, and to not weigh it down with that sadness of being historic, was that the teenage experience is still the same in so many ways. No matter if that book took place in 1998 or 2020, well, not 2020, 2019, some things would have still remained the same. Maverick would still be this kid who's trying to find his way. He would still be someone who's trying to define himself. He would still be someone who is learning what it really means to be a responsible man and a father, a parent. He would still have that about him. So whether it took place in 2019 or 1998, that remained, and that helped me so much. But it is a stake right in the heart to know that book is considered historic.
It's a true sign that you're getting old. It's funny because I think teenagers these days are a little bit switched into the 90s, because to them it's very retro. All the fashions come back. They still listen to the music. For me, that's interesting.
For them, the 90s are what the 70s were for previous generations. And it's like, oh, this is that just makes it a harder pill to swallow. But they're into the music even and stuff. So that helps too. But I have gotten a couple of DMs asking me, what is a pager? And I'm like, oh God, why didn't he just text her? Oh God, okay, baby, talk to your parents. Make them feel old. Don't bring that to me.
I've got to ask one question. I'll ask this question before throwing to some questions from our audience. I've just got to ask for myself, obviously, there's some really serious subject matter in Concrete Rose, but you actually still keep a real sense of humour and lightness to your work. I particularly, like the sparky kind of chemistry between Maverick and Lisa. But one of the things that amused me most about it was Peanut's imaginary vocabulary. And, Peanut just makes up these long, complicated sounding words that don't exist. And every time he came up with one, I would laugh, but I would also think, I'm like, this is somebody that Angie knows. Like, this is not really made up, is it? Like, Angie has got a friend that does this, and she's been writing them down in notebooks for years, just collecting them, waiting to give them to Peanut. Is that true, or have I assumed wrong?
You're not wrong. You're the first person to ask about that too. It's someone from my old neighborhood. He was known for making up words to sound smart, and you would be like, what did he just say? Like combining words all the time. So I definitely took that from real life.
Do you think you're going to get busted for it, or?
Nah, I don't think so. I don't think he reads, which is why he makes up words. So
yeah. Hilarious. Oh, I'm glad I didn't assume wrong. Maybe this relates a little bit actually to one of the questions that we've got in from the audience, because I really appreciated that there's still that sense of humour and lightness. But this is a question from Elise, who says, Angie, you write about such important but challenging topics, including trauma and systemic racism. I can imagine this would have an effect on you at times, as it would do for a lot of writers. How do you look after yourself in writing, and what does self-care look like for you?
Self-care and the way I look out for myself in writing both look like therapy. I'm a huge supporter of mental health and seeking help when you need it. There's nothing wrong with being in therapy. There's nothing wrong with saying I'm not okay. The strongest thing you can do is say I'm weak. So therapy is life-changing. It changed my life. I'm even on anxiety medication, which helped me so much and gave me so much more clarity and calmed me down a lot, which I needed. I think a lot of us need that after the year of 2020, but therapy has been a lifesaver. When writing some of that hard stuff, what helps me is infusing the book with the lighter moments, the funny moments, the loving moments. Life is about balance. That's how we get through. That's how we deal with things when we're going through emotional turmoil, laughing, finding things to laugh about, and sharing love and happiness with our family and loved ones. That's what helps us. So I have to infuse my book with the same thing to help me write them. Self-care also looks like unplugging, doing mindless things or childish things like play video games, watch basketball, even though it stresses me out these days. Just finding things to enjoy that have nothing to do with books or writing. And talking with friends about stuff that has nothing to do with books or writing. Stepping away from it is sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself. So yeah, that's my self-care. Also, right now I am in the early stages of adopting a dog.
Oh, I'm glad we're going to talk about this.
Yes.
Twitter.
We haven't found my fur baby yet, but I know that he or she is out there. But right now it's like I'm doing all this research on products and training and things like that. So that's helped me a whole lot. That's been awesome self-care. Like I have a whole Amazon list that I'm making.
Great.
that I'm gonna take to local stores because they need support.
Yeah.
But I've made a whole product list of things I'm probably gonna get. My editor says I'm nesting like an expecting parent.
Yeah, I mean, it's called a fur baby for a reason. I think you're allergic, aren't you? Like, and that's like kind of narrowing things down.
Yeah. I have an allergy to some dander. So my doctor recommended getting a non-shedding hypoallergenic pup. So that's what I'm working towards. That's what we're trying to do. I'm gonna find one. It's gonna happen. I'm not concerned. It's gonna happen. And I'm just gonna shock everybody one day and post a picture of my fur baby, and the world will be right for me.
It's amazing how many writers have dogs. Like I used to have a whippet, and there's a whole group of writers in my hometown that all own whippets. It's really uncanny. It's like the writer's dog, which is very strange. But I want to throw my hat in the ring and say, Google Chinese crested dogs.
Oh, okay.
They're like, I'm into hairless dogs. They're hairless. They look ridiculous. Some people think they're the ugliest dogs in the world, but I think they're the most adorable dogs in the world. So that's my suggestion to you for that.
Right.
So we've got a question from Rachel now. I'm glad we got in the dog talk. I wanted to do that. This is a question from Rachel, who's asking, how do you create your characters and make them complex, relatable and interesting? Because she's a young writer and she doesn't really know how to create characters that connect with the world.
Well, Rachel, I would say, one, don't worry so much about them connecting with the whole world. If you write them and you get to know them and you develop them, somebody somewhere will connect with them. It's all about getting to know your characters and knowing more about them than anybody else does. I do some of the most random stuff to get to know my characters. I do Harry Potter quizzes to figure out which house my character's in, because that's actually really revealing about their personality. Yeah. Oh, which are they?
Oh yeah, you can if you want, please. I think I'd like to know. Yeah.
Maverick would be the most badass Gryffindor to ever step in Gryffindor Tower.
Yeah.
Like there's no doubt about it. But I get to know my characters. I find out, I ask myself, what would their favorite music be? If they're in a bad mood, what do they do? What are their hobbies? What do they like? Get to know your characters. And although all of this stuff may not ever make it onto the page, if you know it, it will find its way onto the page in different ways, and in their personality. So it's just about getting to know them. Also, here's a fun tip. Sometimes basing characters on people you know helps a whole lot. And insiders tip, rarely do people recognize themselves when you write about them. Like I wrote several people in The Hate U Give, several people that I know, I wrote them as characters into that book, and only one person recognized themselves. And that was the neighborhood drunk. That's the only person who recognized themselves in the whole book. Everybody else, no. So take little bits and pieces from people you know. And another thing, maybe take little bits and pieces from yourself and put them in the character. As long as you care about them, somebody else will too. So you just got to get to that point where you write characters that you care about. And that's it. I promise you. That's all it is. So start doing some quizzes. Start doing some of those weird BuzzFeed quizzes about you, but do it from your character's perspective.
Any
It'll get
excuse
you
to
going.
do a BuzzFeed quiz and call it work. I'm writing.
Yes, that's it. It's research.
That's fantastic. You've actually written a guided writing journal for young people. Do you get to work much with young writers? And was that a role that you thought that when you did have your first novel out, is that a role that you thought you would go on to take, is teaching young people how to write?
I thought I would. But the thing is, I don't get to do it as much as I thought I would because of schedule and all of this and that, and now COVID. I do work with a local organization here. I'm a board member for a local organization here in Mississippi called the Young Writers Well, and we're all about mentoring young writers and helping them out. And while I don't do the actual mentoring day to day, I do come in and do talks with them and answer questions for them and read their stuff, things like that. So I try to get involved that way. And then I did a scholarship with my alma mater for young writers. And we just did it last year, and we have only one winner, but I try to talk with her and check in on her and read her stuff and mentor her on that. But because I can't do it to the degree that I wish I could, that's why we did Find Your Voice. Because so many young people want to know, how do I write? How do I start writing? What do I do? And it really walks you through step by step my entire process. And it gives you activities that you can do for developing your characters, developing your plot. So it allows me to be everywhere at once, and give young writers that mentorship that I wish I had the time to do.
I mean, it must be hard. You can't give everything to everyone, or you'd have no time to write your books, which everyone wants you to do. We want to keep reading your books, so it's a difficult act. Look, I've got a very important question now. It's from Elise. She would just curious about your pop vinyl figurines back there on the wall. This is a lesson to everyone. Just be careful what's in the background when you're zooming.
Yeah.
Could you take us on a quick tour of that shelf request?
Yeah, I just got one. That's what I was bending down to pick too. I just got one. I'm waiting on the other three, but this is my newest. It's Chili from TLC in the Waterfalls video. Talk about the 90s.
Oh my goodness!
When they're standing under the waterfall.
No!
So they have three of them. They have the regular ones apparently, and then they have the versions of them under the waterfall. So I just got this one today. I'm waiting on the other other two waterfall versions and the 3 regular versions. So this is the newest
incredible.
One.
I haven't watched that video in years, but I close my eyes and I can see that video.
Yes.
It's very indelibly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was iconic. So this is really cool to have to me, because TLC is my favorite group. Let's see who else we got. We got Tupac. I got 3 Tupacs. I got 3 Notorious B.I.G.s. I got Ice Cube. I got Salt and Pepper. I got Coming to America.
I
got Ava DuVernay. I got all the Black Panther ones. And I got Migos, the rap group, and Zion Williamson from the New Orleans Pelicans basketball team. So,
amazing.
And Lil Wayne and Eazy-E. So I'm building it up.
Yeah. Are you really disciplined and you don't open the box and take them out of the box, or do you very carefully open the box and have a little?
I've never opened any of them. Never.
Wow.
None of them. I've never opened any of them. So
strange.
one day when I have children, I will not be just passing along my books to them, but they're going to get this and they better take good care of it.
Amazing. I think keep them on the top shelf would be my advice. So we're getting close to time. I'm going to ask another question, but if anyone wants to shoot through a last minute question, this is your last chance to ask Angie a question. But I just want to ask a few, and that was how did you know where you wanted to leave Maverick at the end of Concrete Rose? Because, we know he has a really long and checkered history. And I personally felt at the end of the book, I felt so uplifted and so warm, even though I knew that other things were going to happen to him. I really loved where I was left. Was that you always knew where you were going to leave Maverick at the end, or you played around with a few different endings?
I played around with a few different ones. Spoiler alert, if we end up doing a special edition, I think there will be a bonus chapter That will be one of the alternative endings I almost did, which, and I think it's a chapter that will make readers of The Hate U Give very weepy. That's all I'll say. There may be two versions. I don't know yet. But that moment, it felt right for him, because this is when he's starting to see the light in the darkness. This is when, and pun intended on that. Once you read the book, you'll get what I mean. But this is when things are starting to lighten up in his life. This is when things are starting to look better. And it just felt like the right moment. But the thing is about Maverick, there still feels like there's so much story that I could tell on him, which is why we're hopefully we're in the early process of discussing possibly having a show based on Concrete Rose.
Oh.
And we would be able to focus on Maverick more and talk about his story more, because there's still so much to explore way before The Hate U Give ever happens. So I'm excited about that.
That's really exciting. Wow.
Yes.
So I think it's always nice to finish a session with a few book recommendations. And luckily, Cheska's thrown us a final question, which I think is a great one to finish on. And that's just, were there any books by Black men that you read when you were preparing to write Concrete Rose that you could recommend as being good ones for our audience to have a read of?
Yes. Every single thing that Jason Reynolds has written, I read them, from Long Way Down to Ghost to All American Boys. I'm looking at my Jason shelf right now. All of his works, highly, highly, highly recommend. Same thing with Kwame Alexander, Crossover, and that entire series. And it's told in verse, so it's a quick read, but it's a powerful read. I also read Lamar Giles, who is an awesome YA author. Lamar does thrillers as well as now he's doing middle grade fiction, and I read his work. I also read Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me, which is a letter that he wrote to his teenage son, but really it's a letter for anybody that they can read. And it's a portrait of America in one of the most honest ways you will ever see. But I think it will reveal more about society as a whole and not just America. So Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. And I would also recommend the autobiography of Malcolm X. That's something I read because Maverick is a huge follower of Malcolm X. And we don't see it as much in Concrete Rose, but later on as an adult, we know. And so I read that autobiography to understand how Malcolm became who he was when he started out as a hustler known as Detroit Red, who was once in prison and once in a gang. Sounds familiar, right? So I read that too. Highly, highly, highly recommend that. And then The Rose That Grew from Concrete by Tupac, which inspired the title of the book, Concrete Rose. It's a book of poetry that Tupac wrote. A lot of them were written when he was 16, 17 years old. And that poem, but that entire book was such a huge influence on me writing Maverick and who he is and who he becomes.
Wonderful. That's such a great reading list for everyone. But of course, top of the list to read has to be Concrete Rose. It's such a beautiful book. I loved every page of it. I had lots of big feelings. It was really thought-provoking. I absolutely loved it. Angie, thank you so much for so generously spending your Saturday evening with your Australian fans. So yeah, everyone, please, I can't recommend Concrete Rose highly enough. And Angie, thank you so much for sharing your time and thoughts and wisdom today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all for spending your Sunday morning with me. Enjoy your warm weather while I freeze my butt off.
Leanne, thank you so much for asking Angie those questions that we all wanted to know the answers to. And to you, Angie, on behalf of Readings and on behalf of Walker Books, thank you for being so generous. You are such a delight. I actually want to invite you over to dinner next weekend. If you could come, that would be marvelous. We would have such a good time.
I would love to come as long as I can stay longer than I stayed for my last trip to Australia. I was at the Melbourne
The Melbourne
Writers'
Writers Festival, remember it
Mm-hmm.
well. I think
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
the bestseller actually for our
Awesome.
readings bookshop at that particular time. So we all fell in
Yeah.
love with you then, and our love has not waned at all.
Oh, thank you.
To each and every one of you that came here today on this very warm, wonderful Sunday, thank you so much. But mainly, enormous gratitude to you, Angie, and to you, Leanne. Just a tremendous, tremendous hour.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Goodbye, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
And of course, keep reading.
Bye.